Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Brothers of Metal, Fimbulvinter, out November 1st on AFM Records. This album has 13 tracks, 58 minutes in length, and this is the band's third full-length studio album, and they are a Swedish heavy metal band. When it comes to the design of this record, I think that's perhaps the least important part of the album. This is a record that doesn't really matter how you put these 13 songs. The experience of the record is not going to change at all because it's not about an overall experience. This is not a record that becomes important, the track listing, so that you can follow a narrative or you can follow a vibe or you can follow a path where you can see that the songs have some sort of connection to one another and you're able to build ebbs and flows from those connections and from that path. This album is built more like a compilation, like a greatest hits. It's more about the individual nature of the songs, what they can offer, what they can give, the quality that they possess, and not necessarily how that translates to the overall perspective of the record itself. So it's a different style design, but one that I feel works a lot better for the sound that this album has. And the sound that this album has is one that's very diverse. You cannot put this record under a single umbrella. This is more than a heavy metal album, this is more than a power metal album because it has all sorts of different influences. It has folk metal, it has rock, it has arena rock. It just has a lot of different textures that fall outside of the spectrum of heavy metal and power metal. Those are obviously there, but there's a lot more than just that. It's an album that almost feels like they wanted to create music, they wanted to create songs that had an impact for them regardless of how they sounded or what genre or what category they would fall under. So it's more important to create the better song possible, to create the more interesting songs possible, and not necessarily worry about do they fit with one another, do the sounds merge with one another. If one song sounds better because of the theme of the song pushes more towards a folk driven inspiration, that's where they went. If the track had a little bit more of a classic new wave of British heavy metal sound, that's where they went. So the sound on this record is really driven by the theme of the songs, or the theme of the songs drives the sound on this record, and that changes on a song by song basis. What doesn't change is the great production behind this album. The sound is phenomenal, larger than life. Really nice, crisp sound. It's not muffled. The sound when it's big because the drums sound big. It's big because the guitars sound big. It's not big because it has all of these other effects around it that help give it size but doesn't give it substance. So this is an album that sound-wise, on the bigger scale, it always has substance. It always has something within it. The songs have great texture, super rich, even in the more simple, if you will, stripped down tracks. The amount of emotion, the amount of texture, the amount of layers, the amount of subtle substances that they infuse in those tracks give them such life, give them such energy that allow them to, on one hand, to be very stripped down, but on the other hand, to offer so much more to the listener that you're able to see beyond what is perhaps right in front of you. So from a production standpoint and also from an overall sound standpoint, this record is really phenomenal. I have no doubts in saying that sound-wise, the band has never sounded this good. And it's kudos to them because they were able to go in a lot of different directions but sound great regardless of what the direction of that sound was. The drums on this record, for example, I mentioned that they have so much power, they have so much strength, they give so much emphasis to the songs. They allow the songs to grow, to evolve, to explode, but always feel like they have a warmth to them, even at their biggest point, as they do as their smallest point. So the drum sound on this record is definitely at a different level than what I've heard from them up until now. The guitar is the same thing. I love the solos, great guitar sound. An album that is not guitar driven, and I was not expecting it to be guitar driven, especially when you go through it and you see the different influences of genres. It would be very difficult to allow one instrument to be the driver of the record. If the album was more power metal based or more heavy metal based, I could see the guitars having more of that predominance. having the bandwidth of sound, experiences, influences that this record has, it allows them to bring the guitars into the picture, allow them to be part of the tapestry of the sound on the album, as are the drums, but not allowing one element over the other to be the dominant factor song in and song out. So what drives each song is as dynamic as what influences the sound on each song. The main element of this record that surprised me, outside of everything that I said already, because I've seen a growth in this band, and I think this album is the next step in that growth. But the one element that surprised me the most was that this record has, I'm going to say, at least 85% female vocals on it. That was something that I was expecting it because of the dynamics of the record, because of the dynamics of the sound. I was expecting a little bit more, not necessarily an even number, but I was expecting things to be a little bit more equal, if you will, or at least to match what I've seen in previous records from them, and that's not necessarily the case here. You're still gonna get the male vocals on the record, obviously, but I felt like they took a little bit of a backseat on this album, and this is not a bad thing. I'm just stating a fact. I enjoyed the female vocals having a little bit more predominance on this album because it matched better the sound experience of the record, it matched better to the themes of the songs, and therefore gave this album a little bit more of an organic experience, and it didn't try to force a round peg in a square hole. So using the male vocals sometimes in the forefront, but most often than not as a backing vocalist or as a layer to vocals that already exist, it added a different kind of spice. It also allows the album to sound bigger because the female vocals on the record, they levitate a lot more off the sound, off the album, and that also helps with the overall size that this record has. So when the songs need to sound bigger, that helps that same size. It helps. It doesn't bring the song down. It actually pushes the song upwards. And the more folky songs where you bring a little bit more of Mother Nature into the track, having a female voice also enhances that experience. Once again, it gives it more a sense of validity. It gives it a little bit more of an organic vibe, an organic texture to the way those songs are presented. So I was surprised at first glance that there was so much, the scale was tipped so much in that direction. But the more I listened to the record, the more I realized that it was the only way to go about it, considering what this overall album is trying to put forward. And when you look at all of these angles, when you look at all of these elements, you can say that the album on one hand is a little bit chaotic because it's very difficult to find a red line, at least sonically. Vocally is a lot easier to find that red line. Those female vocals are your red line. But sonically it's a lot more difficult to find a red line across the album, which does give the record a sense of chaos, controlled chaos perhaps, but a sense of chaos nevertheless. But that takes nothing away from the quality that this album has, the quality of the sound, the quality of the composition, the quality in which the songs are presented, the quality of the vocals. This is definitely their best sounding record to date. I think this is their best album to date. I just wish somehow the songs would a little bit better connected with one another, even with that sense of diversity, and maybe a little bit shorter, because 58 minutes, 13 songs, it starts to really weigh down the listener as you progress down the line. Being as diverse as it is, it softens it a little bit because every song is going to change and you're never really sure what's coming around the corner. So you don't get a sense of repetition with this album, even that you have that length, but it does get a little bit too long, and I think that's going to take away from the overall playability of the record as a whole. But if you take the songs out of the album and you just appreciate them on an individual basis as singles, as if this was a compilation, then you're not going to have any issues at all. And from that standpoint, I still feel like this is their best record to date. Now, as far as singles are concerned, or favorite songs I should say, I'm going to start off with Heart of Stone. I love this track. This is an anthem. It's a big, powerful sounding song, great drums, great guitar sound. It's one of those tracks that just blows up your speakers. The vocals match the size of the song, match the intensity of the song. The chorus is a lot more melodic, a lot more bombastic. It has that bigger presence, and obviously having choirs in the vocals, choirs with the vocals in the chorus helps that absolute larger size and that sense of explosion that the chorus has here, because the verses feel a little bit more contained and then the chorus absolutely ignites the song. Also great solo section, and that's kind of the icing on the cake for a song that has this old school heavy metal style to it. Now next you have Rivers of Gold. Now this is a more folky track. I would go as far as to say a folky ballad, if you will. There's a very warm sound to this song. There's a little bit of a simplistic nature at times, specifically when it comes to the verses. The female vocals add a sense of warmth to the song as well. The vocal layers work really well on this track, as you bring in the male vocals and you add them as layers underneath the female vocals, and that gives not only size to the song, but I think I felt like the texture that it gave to the song, it really enriched the overall experience. So it's a track that also has a very big chorus, and that helps set the track apart, and it helps divide that more folkiness and simplistic nature of the verses with a little bit more of a complex approach, both vocally and sonically, in the chorus. Last but definitely not least, Blood Red Sky. Talk about a folky song. Now this is a great folk track. It has a very earthy nature to it. The way the vocals come across, the female vocals come across with that more folkiness of sound, that earth nature sound approach that the track has, reminds me of Heilung. This song has a little bit of that vibe, a little bit more elaborate than a Heilung song in terms of the sound, of the impact of the drums, of the impact of the guitars, but at its core it really feels a more tribal style sounding folk song than any other track on the record. The closest song is Rivers of Gold, and Rivers of Gold has a glimpse of folk. This one takes it in a completely different perspective. These two tracks come back to back. They have some similarities to them, but they still offer different perspectives of what folk metal could sound like. And I think you get two very different ideas on this record of what folk influences can do in a song. Blood Red Sky is a more earthy, it's a more grounded song with still a very great approach from an overall design. The vocals are very deliberate. It has a great chorus that allows the song to grow. But like I said, it's a track that feels very earthy, very warm, very grounded, and has that Heilung touch to it that helps set it apart in the context of the record. This is it, Brothers of Metal, Fimbulvinter, out November 1st on AFM Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Hit me up in the comment section. I'll see you all at the next video. Take care, guys.